Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How is everyone doing? Are you handling your nausea, your rage? I'm assuming you feel the same way that I do about the world in its current configuration. I don't know if you would call it handling so much as eating midnight potato chips to give me a brief moment of pleasure that can wipe away enough of the negative feelings that I can start to feel drowsy. You get 4 fingers of lemonade, Whole Foods low-cal lemonade, and you get some potato chips and 6 little mini pretzel twists, because you gotta have a couple potato chips and then a mini pretzel twist to cleanse the palate, of course. Is this the healthiest way to deal with these feelings? I don't think so, but it's also not the unhealthiest. I'm not dropping a bunch of benzos. Is that what you do with benzodiazepine? You quote-unquote drop a bunch of? Not dropping a bunch of benzos and living in a dream world. That's worse, right? But do you know what else is a somewhat constructive way to deal with those feelings? Why, distracting yourself with great interviews, like today's interview with David Longstreth. If you don't know who David is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Southbury, Connecticut, musician David Longstreth recorded his first album, The Graceful Fallen Mango, after dropping out of college. After returning to finish his degree, he began recording under the name The Dirty Projectors. And in 2003, I was like, when I'm reading these bios and I'm constructing them, to write them as if like, maybe you didn't see who was on the show, and maybe you don't know David, so hearing that is a surprise to you. Where was I? In 2003, Western Vinyl released their first album, The Glad Fact. The Dirty Projectors continued to record albums and slowly built a name for themselves in the thrumming Brooklyn music scene of the aughts. In 2009, Domino released their album Beta Orca to a great deal of acclaim, and in all, the band has released 20 albums and EPs. Their latest, Song of the Earth, is a collaboration with the German orchestral group Stargaze, and it's fantastic. I love Stargaze. I love the Dirty Projectors. I did an interview a while ago, a couple years, with Aaron Dyer, I think that's how you say the name, who also did an album with Stargaze, which is similarly great. But yeah, I've been listening to Dirty Projectors for decades now. I remember getting the Getty address back in grad school and really liking it. So I was excited to talk to David. I think I may have gotten in my head a little bit. I always do that when I'm talking to someone on the show who makes... I've created this hierarchy in my head where avant-garde art is at the top of the hierarchy, and then it kind of flows down from there to, TV sitcoms, comedy videos, the stuff that I truck in. So I've created this hierarchy in my head that I don't think exists, but I'm just like, I talk to someone who makes capital A art, and I'm like, what are they talk to me, they're like, what's this tiny joke man doing? Asking me these questions. But I mean, David wasn't like that. He was very nice. We ended up talking a lot about emotions. I tend to fall into this pattern on the show, and I'm trying to break out of it, where I somehow think that art, even though art can do anything or be anything, is somehow a conduit for emotions, or can be in many cases. But especially with music, I tend to think that, whether correct or not. But we end up talking a lot about his emotional upbringing, and I thought it was really interesting. So I hope you like this episode. Coming up on the show, hey, speaking of Dirty Projectors, this was totally set up independently, but I'm talking to Maya Friedman, whose new album's coming out. She is in the new version of the Dirty Projectors. Her new album's great, so that's coming up. Mr. Fish, fantastic political cartoonist. Kelly Sue DeConnick, fantastic comics writer. Toon Yards, David Bazan from Pedro the Lion. Michael DeForge, great indie comics artist, writer. These are all great. So look forward to them, but for now, let's talk to David. Do you like California? Because I'm also from the East Coast.
Yeah.
And it feels, as an anxious person, I feel out of water here.
Yeah, because your anxiety can't attach to anything specific and it becomes more amorphous and
Yeah. Yes.
yeah.
Yes, you nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an Easterner coming west. That's a classic. I think so. There's a lot about California that I really love, and some stuff that I don't love as much about Los Angeles.
What specifically, outside of maybe like, I think your brother lives on this coast, right?
Yeah.
Outside of that, is there anything that drew you out here?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So my mom is from LA, actually.
Oh,
My grandfather went to Los Angeles High School
okay.
when there was one.
Is that like what turned into Hollywood High, or is that?
That sounds right. I would have to, consult the family oracle, but I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's right. And so all of that's to say, I grew up with this big lore, around California, the mythos of California. And so my parents met at Stanford. And so, there's childhood pictures of me wearing a Stanford hat in front of Half Dome,
Yeah.
And I always just, the whole time that I was growing up and that I lived in New York and everything, I always knew, like, okay, at some point I'm gonna go to California.
This is interesting because my parents are from New York, so New York held that same same thing in my head.
Yeah.
It was some neuron in my brain just
Yeah.
like held on to, like, oh yeah, that's where that's a beacon. That's something for me.
Yeah.
Even though for seemingly there was no rational reason. It just was a thing that I don't even know how to characterize it. Do you know, like, have you thought about what it held for you? Does that make sense as a question?
I know. It does. And yeah, it's funny maybe how universal that is in a way. Or, well, we're talking about it, how it relates to both of our sort of parents. But, like, my wife is from California, and her whole upbringing, she had this mythology about New York City.
Huh.
Just from movies or Susan Sontag or something, and she was just like, I want to go to New York City.
Yeah, I guess also it's not like it's not like we were like Oklahoma City or something.
Yeah.
These are cities that loom large in the American mythos and in film and TV that I'm sure built all of our generation. We're around the same age. So that like, in the same way that, like, as much as I don't want Woody Allen films now to have influenced me,
Yeah.
at the time, like, I couldn't help but get that lodged in my head. And
Yeah.
if only Albert Brooks had come into my life sooner, maybe Los Angeles would have. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but I think what maybe your original orientation of the question is a more interesting one. Yeah, like our sort of parents' mythologies and how they factor into ours, or like the stuff that our parents tell us with more or lesser degrees of intentionality, how the child constructs a mythology around all that. It's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I grew up probably 90 minutes from New York City, and we just had no lore, no romance about New York City. We would go into the city about once a year, like between Christmas and New Year's, to go to the Natural History Museum or something, and my dad just white knuckling the traffic on the shouting at the, so stressed out by the New York drivers. Yeah. So it felt like, after college and all that stuff, it felt like there was this gravitational pull bringing me to New York because of music and, just friends broadly. But, I didn't even realize until much later that some people, the way some young people feel when they arrive in the big city is like, hey, I made it.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get here my whole life, and I'm finally here. And I didn't have that.
Oh, okay. There's a lot here, especially with parents' mythology. I
Yeah.
want to go back to that,
Okay.
but I think it's also interesting too, like when you arrive in this place that was mythologized, it's all timing. When you arrived in New York, I have
Yeah.
to assume, I don't know the exact timeline, but just trying to think about it, music was on the ascent. Whereas when I arrived there
Yeah.
in like 08, 09, when I really started doing comedy was like 2010, and comedy died in New York. Like it kind of like all the people that were like had gotten famous from UCB got famous from like Amy Poehler and Bobby Moynihan. That was like the earlier part, or like people who had, not that I was seeking fame, but I'm just saying that like it drained.
Sure.
Like people went the whole like first couple generations of UCB went out to LA, and then
Did Bobby Moynihan go to LA? I love Bobby Moynihan. I haven't thought about him in a second. I love him.
he's great. He went to SNL, and just and
Yeah.
and then
All right.
it was just UCB became like a bunch of people who are interested in comedy and a bunch of people who are interested in becoming famous. And it really was like, and then all the sketch died in the city and all this other stuff. But
Yeah.
like you get to New York at a time when it's a burgeoning, wonderful music scene. At least
Yeah.
I'm assuming that if I've got the timeline right.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I mean, like I started going down. I was in college in Connecticut, and I would come down to the city on the weekends and stuff to play concerts. So I started being in New York a lot, like 2002, 3, 4, and then I guess I moved there in the fall of 5, back in 5. And yeah, I think the way I felt, I think I had a little bit of a jadedness about it, where I was like, whatever the received romance is around the creativity, the inherent creativity of this city, the things that have happened here before, Dylan in the West Village or CBGBs or all that stuff. To me in my mind, it was so Hard Rock Cafe that I wasn't under any illusions that I was even in the same place, or that the place mattered at all. I had no, what's the word? Not nostalgia. I had no, I don't know, sensitivity to be neutral about it, about that. And at the same time, I was so, and I think that's probably good. I think it's good that I didn't have really any misconceptions about that. It would have been daunting. And then at the same time, I think I was so sort of like in my own little tunnel that there was a really incredible, fertile, creative thing happening. The right conditions of cheap enough rent and dense enough, people all coming together, and whatever other creative conditions, are generative in that way. Yeah, so many people doing so much amazing shit. I guess when I'm, and yeah, like we were part of a community. We had lots of friends and everything. I just mean from this vantage point, I wish I had picked my head up a little bit more and been able to say, "Whoa, this is quite a moment we're in."
Well, so that's partly, I think that's like becoming an adult almost, where you are, at least for me, I don't know if, well, I'll just ask it. Do you think you were emotionally open at the time? Were you kind of like, because you said you weren't sensitive, but does that mean like, because this is me pre-therapy, and I'm just like,
Sure.
I guess I'm here to do comedy. I'm finally figured out what I want to do with my life in some way.
Yeah.
I'm here to do this. I was finally feeling complete in some way. It feels so stupid to say that in some, but like it really did. I feel like I was like
doesn't
finally
sound stupid. Yeah.
But I wasn't like emotionally even really registering what was happening. And that happened like later.
Yeah.
Were you open? Did you understand inside what was happening?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I was, I think that I was, yeah, I think that I was just very, I was just trying to make something happen, but probably at some level I was like, this is improbable, that I would be able to, you know, get to write songs and perform for people, for my life. And so I really gotta, you know, rub the two sticks together and make a fire here. So I didn't have a lot of available bandwidth to, yeah, as you're saying, reflect and all that stuff. But you know what? I will say, coming the young person in New York, and then you hit 30 or whatever, you move to LA. What we're taught, we're both speaking from a position of hindsight now, and LA very much is the city where you come to unpack your 20s to figure out what New York was all about. But something you said in there was interesting to me because sometimes I look to comedy and it's like it's a purer form of like what the musician is doing in a way. They're dissimilar in lots of ways, but I guess what I mean is you don't have a guitar. You don't even have a guitar.
Oh, I see.
You're just standing there on stage. All you have is your presence.
Yeah. Oh, well, that also comes with, I mean, you have a guitar. You have I remember seeing Ben Gibbard once where he just said something between songs. It was just very offhanded. It wasn't funny, but the audience cracked up. Yeah. And I was just like, I was jealous of that moment because the music created such a field of and like everyone was enjoying themselves to the point where just like the slightest thing was hilarious. Yeah. Whereas if I say something that's not even slightly funny, just silence, and then you have to figure out where to. And I'm not even a stand-up. I just do I'll do sketch or live podcast stuff.
Yeah.
There is a vulnerability that is, yes, I get that, but also I will say this.
Yeah.
You're an expressive singer, right? You're not just like there's something there. So the thing that I'm wondering though is when you said you were not, and I'm paraphrasing, so maybe I'm mischaracterizing this, but not emotionally intuitive at that time. I would think listening to your music that you were always somewhat intuitive. Mm-hmm. But was that just are you just able to sing in a certain way that, are you able to put the emotions into the music and then you're just not analyzing them within yourself or not feeling them within yourself? Or I guess what's going on? Because it seems paradoxical, I suppose. Yeah, I know what you mean. And there, that's a very big question. Before we dive into that, I just want to try to close the loop on this sort of obscure thought that I was having. Yes.
In their even heightened vulnerability, the stand-up or the comedian, I wonder if this was the idea. I wonder if the stand-up is in some way like a canary in the coal mine to performing arts in general or something because you're talking about the exodus, the comedy exodus out of New York, and I presumably toward LA, had happened in 08, 09, and music had happened 5 years later. It happened in 2014. Everybody left. I don't know. That's just an idea. It'd be interesting to think about that across other, I don't know, to see whether that bears out in any way.
It's complicated because you also have, I know plenty of stand-ups who are, I don't know if I want to go as far as sociopaths, but who are definitely assholes in real life and on stage are very friendly.
Yeah.
And their persona kind of throws chaff in the wind. And so you don't get to the real person. Uh-huh. And there's also plenty of musicians who can write songs from a point of view that's not their own. So you're also, whether they are personally psychopaths or not or whatever, right? You're still not getting to the person in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Vulnerability is very particular in both cases because it's very individual, and whether you're actually getting a vulnerable person or really connecting is a individualistic pursuit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, person to person. There's a separation between persona and person, and like performers are weird in general. Like with actors, like is there a there with actors? Like who are you actually?
Some there are. Some there's like a real person. Some it's a, like I always think about Peter Sellers. The stories about Peter Sellers are that if he wasn't in a character, he was like a nothing. There was just like a void that existed.
Yeah. I mean, I have the deepest respect for it because it's so, maybe it's redundant to say it's self-sacrificing. I mean, I understand maybe it's the way some people are wired, and then for others, it must be a choice and it must come with tremendous loss, tremendous sacrifice. It's really incredible.
Yeah. Well, I ask this question sometimes, and I'm really curious, what was the line for you between I just want to write songs, I like writing songs, this does something for me.
Yeah.
And I want other people to witness. I want this to be whatever connection. I want this other people, this does something for my ego, whatever the reason is. I don't know. Right. What was that line? Like, how did you cross that line, or what was it? And I could also just be like, I always forget the fun part. Yeah. It's fun to play music.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no, it's all an interesting question. Like, I think it's probably gradual. I think like, when I was a teenager, I mean, I still feel this way sometimes now, actually. It's like, the part that I really love is writing songs.
Yeah.
I do love performing. But, there's everything that goes into those two things can sometimes, it's easy to feel like, oh, well, the album's out. Like, if people want to hear it, it's out there.
Yeah.
Like, how come I have to talk to this, British, something like that. Some radio show where the person has no idea who I am, and I'm sort of like, the format is that I'm supposed to be like selling my music or something. I'm like, what are you talking about? So yeah, no, but I mean, I think that, maybe I want to advance an idea that I'm also still thinking about your other question here, about like self-awareness, emotional presence, and self-awareness, and the sort of Venn diagram of those things in a young person. Because, maybe I feel like maybe a songwriter, a performer, is often someone who needs to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They need to do it. They love to do it. They need to do the need to do it is experienced as a love of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it can come maybe like maybe it's pointless to speak in such generalities, but like, like I have in my mind this idea, this sort of like platonic ideal of just like, a creative, a person who feels things in a heightened way and needs to express them. And you're right that and then the self-awareness of like how that person even is in the world or is with the community or something, that's a different thing. And it's like a gift of age that those two Venn diagrams or those two circles in the Venn diagram can come to overlap more completely.
Yeah. There's also another line, which is the line from being someone who appreciates music or whatever the art is to someone who feels compelled to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an even more interesting line. Because you were talking, I was thinking back to like, what was it between me, like, you know, obsessively listening to Crooked Rain when I was in 8th grade to asking for a guitar for Hanukkah.
Yeah.
And I can't, like, it has to be, part of it, for me at least, had to have been ego. There had to have been something where, like, I want to do this thing that Pavement is doing, or, like, I want to be recognized in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, it's not just, like, I'm not purely, like, some Nietzschean creature. There's more to me, at least. Or I'm telling you that there's more to me.
Yeah, I believe you.
Where like there had to have been something inside me where I'm just like, I need to like I'm compelled to maybe this is Nietzschean, will to power, make something in this world out of the, you know, the nothing. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that line for yourself at all?
Well, what you say, there has to be something. What do you think it is for you?
I'm trying to think back to when I was like, I can picture me in my childhood bedroom with a guitar trying to like figure out songs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know why and now I'm just doing psychoanalysis, but like why like the brown carpet is really coming, like that's the primary feeling, texture, and color that is popping into my head.
Uh-huh.
And there's something about that. I wanted to express myself, but I also wanted the safety of being in that room. Mm-hmm. And this is pure. Now we're just doing my psychoanalysis, but there was something about
I'm here for it.
Because I also would like make jokes in class, but it was because I was a good student and I knew it was kind of safe to make jokes in class because I was a good student, because I knew there wasn't much of a risk of getting in trouble because I knew that the teachers gave me some extra leeway. And also I was in the back of the class. So there's something about like, for me, and this is also why I'm like a fine performer. I'm a good performer. I'm a much better writer, or I'm a pretty good song composer at this point in my life.
Cool.
But if you have to put me in front of an audience, then like the safety, the vulnerability creeps in, and I'm just like, I don't like that. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Does any of that resonate at all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, I would say to the last thing that you said, for me, the performing, the danger, the uncertainty, and the vulnerability, that is something that I like about it. That the possibility of failure, the risk. I think the risk taking is something that I like about being on stage. Yeah.
When you were younger, did you take risks, like outside of creative pursuits? Were you a risk taker?
I mean, I guess yes and no. yes and no. You know, I loved to climb really, really high in trees. I have a weird early memory of, we grew up like with a little stand of woods on our right next to our house, and they were probably last got logged in the 30s or something, and this would have been the 90s. So these were 60, 70-year-old trees. They're tall, these tall swamp maples. And I would just go up as high as I possibly could to where the trunk was as narrow as my arm, And I have this memory, I don't know how old I was, but also it's like, everybody, a lot of our friends did that. My friends were the kids who would do that. My brother would do that a little bit, but I was fearless. In that context. Anyway, I have this early memory of, I had a Donald Duck t-shirt. Actually the same kind of shirt with like the ring around the sleeves and neck that Damon Albarn wears in the Song Number 2 video. And I really loved this shirt because I remember feeling like, and like, how reliable are these memories? But My memory is that I already felt at that time that like they don't make them like this anymore. They don't this kind of like where the dark blue ring around the neck and sleeves. That's like out of fashion now, but I think it's cool. Anyway, so I was wearing this shirt way up in the fucking tree. A branch breaks and I fall straight down the tree and I land with my back on a sharp sort of rock at the base of the tree. And I had this moment where I was just looking up toward the crown of the tree. And then I just sat up and I was fine. And I knew I was fine. But the shirt fell off me like a bib. Like it had gotten snagged on some other little branch or twig or something. And just ripped straight up the back. And it just fell off me like a bib. And I remember being so upset about the shirt.
Sure. Yeah, obviously. But there was nothing about your own personal safety. You were not like, oh, I could, like, there was not any kind of like, oh, I could have just been paralyzed or anything. There was no thought.
I think that it did occur to me as I was like, whatever, arms akimbo, like with my back on this this whatever, this like, a sharp, I don't know what kind of rock it is, but whatever, a rock that came to a sort of point right in the small of where my back had fallen. I think I had a brief moment of being like, shit, that could have really gone south. That could have gone another way for me. But that was like maybe a feeling of like, I don't know what my consciousness was. I wasn't like, I need to rethink tree climbing. But, right. But I was like, oh shit, like, damn, I didn't know that I'm glad that wasn't really bad.
Okay. So now some things are kind of coming into focus because for me, it was all possible repercussions. That's all that swam around in my head was anything that was a possible risk was, oh, this is going to go badly, and therefore I shouldn't embark on it. Yet, I was compelled to try to push against certain boundaries. And so I would always come up against this kind of contradiction that took until I moved to New York to work out, where I'm like, I don't like this life, this kind of suburban feeling is nauseating, not in a bad way. Like other people, like it's not like me judging other people who, for who it's meaningful. I'm just saying like it didn't sit right for me. And yet the idea of pushing against it felt risky, existentially risky, where like the rest of my life, I've always had this vision in my head where like I would just end up in this ratty recliner eating lean cuisines, watching reruns of Everybody Loves Raymond or whatever. And that, because I took a risk and it didn't end up well, this is the rest of my life. And now I just have to live with that. And that's the vision that was in my head for a lot of my...
Wow.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like the sitting in the ratty recliner watching reruns seems way more emblematic of like, I never tried. I never shot my shot. I never took a risk.
Yeah. To me, it's, I took the risk.
And I failed.
Wow. And that failure haunted me so much that I just gave up.
Yeah. Right. That's your fantasy of how it could go.
Yeah. Right.
Oh.
But you, like, just the idea of climbing a tree, I was just like, well, I'm going to fall and get paralyzed, so I'm just not going to climb the tree.
Yeah.
Like, for you, that just didn't, was it that it didn't enter your head, or you were like, oh, I could fall, but it's going to be fine? Because I think I wonder if it's just my parents grew up in the wake of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And so like everything felt like a danger to them, and they just like passed that on to me.
Yeah. I bet maybe it's something like that. And do you have siblings?
I have a younger sister.
Mm-hmm. So you were the eldest child. You were their first one.
Yeah.
I'm the younger of two. But then I do think that my parents' level of, I guess you could call it trust, in both of us from what feels like the jump is commendable, but also in hindsight bewildering. We would just disappear all weekend in the woods,
Yeah.
making weird forts and
Mm.
climbing trees. My parents were into like subsistent. They were like college educated people, but in the 70s they were really into farming. They got into the kind of back to the land thing. And long story short, there was a barn. We had a barn and there was a hayloft because we had sheep. And so, my dad would fill the hayloft with these bales of hay, and that's what the sheep eat in all winter long when there's like snow on the ground or whatever. And my brother built like a flamethrower out of a Windex bottle, where you can just by pulling the trigger of the Windex can, and I guess Windex maybe itself is highly flammable, or else they had some sort of alcohol in there. It would also ignite a lighter that they had like sort of masking taped to the Windex thing, and it would shoot this massive flame, and it was amazing. I was 5 years younger and largely not the more responsible one of the two of us. But I remember being like, Jake, you can't experiment with your flamethrower in the hayloft. Like there's dried hay all over the ground, like this would go up. But maybe he was being cautious. But anyway, yeah, like our parents were very and again, like I'm a dad now. Like I maybe it's not the world we live in, but it is hard to imagine being as hands off as they were.
Yeah.
In some ways, looking back, and particularly my vision around kind of like child rearing and stuff like that has changed now that I have a kid. There were things that I might have asked of them, in hindsight, but in general, the fact that how much independence they gave us, physical independence, like we're talking about, but even just sort of like emotional or psychological independence. They didn't know any other way. This wasn't a parenting choice of theirs, but we were just like on our own planet. And I think in a lot of ways that was formative to me.
Yeah. But does it make you an expressive person? Or does it make you, like, are they modeling being, are they, okay, let's start here. Are they expressive people? And are they modeling it for you? Or are they completely off in this, we're adults. I always call like our parents' generation kind of like the ice storm generation. I mean, we're a little...
Totally. I love that movie.
Yeah. But that's like, we're maybe it's more of the people who were born in 1970, like their parents.
Yeah.
And we're younger than that. But
Gen
like
X.
still.
Yeah. Because when were you born?
79. So yeah. And you're like 81, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm late 81.
Yeah.
My brother was 77. Yeah.
But still, that kind of like adults are in their adult world, kids are in the kid world.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of crossover except maybe family dinners and things like that, or like, vacations.
Yeah. 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 Gen X, like the latchkey kids, they call, because the kid comes home, lets themselves home in from school and then just watches TV until the parents get home.
Yeah.
That's the cultural trope. Yeah. It wasn't exactly that. Although, yeah, we didn't spend a lot of time with our parents. I think my brother and I definitely grew up with the sense of a stable household. And so in the context of that, like it never even occurred to me things that other kids, it turns out are thinking about all the time. Like, not only like, how are mom and dad today? Or like, are they going to stay together or something like that? Or even more fundamental questions about like, how are we going to get to school? Are we going to have enough food? Like none of those things ever crossed my mind. And the sort of relationship between my parents always just seemed like this immutable thing. And so with that structure in place, I think there was a lot of room to just bounce around,
Mm.
psychologically, emotionally, whatever, and still feel like we were gonna be. To go back to what the image you were using earlier of like I would fall and die or something. There's a lot of room to just feel like if we fell, it would be okay.
Yeah.
You know?
So, okay then. Were they, to go back to this question,
Yeah.
were they emotionally open people? Were they expressive people?
No.
So was it like waspy and
Yes.
they're, oh, okay. So even, cause
Yeah.
like, could they say, I love you at least?
No.
Or was that, oh, so it was really, so then where do you learn? Where do you learn how to use your emotions?
Yeah. It's a great question. That's in life, you know, in life, truly. Yeah.
Like later on?
Yeah. 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 With friends and in relationships, you know, and this question of emotions. I wonder if my parents are going to listen to this, and I'm sort of like trying to figure out whether how I'm responding based on that. But you know, I know that my parents are proud. They've said as much anyway, that their children are artists. I believe they are. But like us being artists is a peculiar product of this household where emotions are not expressed, you know, and so for both my brother and I think like the idea, but what my parents are very into in this, you know, again, very Protestant work ethic kind of a way, they're just into their vocations. They're into what they're into. They love birding. They love gardening. They love, you know, projects around the house. They're very, very handy and they're just very industrious people. They're always working. And so, you know, my brother and I, like, I was joking with him the other day that like what our work is processing emotion. Our work is to process emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And that is definitely the legacy of that environment that we grew up in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. If I'm putting this together correctly, the idea of not just a work ethic, but like almost an this is my word, but obsessive work ethic is modeled in when you're younger.
I don't know if it's obsessive. You know,
Well, gardening, you have to be like, or maybe again, that's my characterization. For gardening, you have to kind of like it requires tending all the time.
Focus.
And focus. It's a great way.
Dedication, focus, and
Yes.
dedication. Yeah, for sure. And you know, you're gonna weed. You know, you're gonna weed the flower bed this Sunday. Next Sunday, you're gonna need to weed it again. Gonna be new weeds in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, this is a very tenuous metaphor, let's say, but like to the creative process, and I don't know how you work, but definitely like thinking about like the metaphor of gardening to like writing, say, where it's constant. Like there isn't a thing that I've written where I'm like, that's it, I'm done with it. It's just that, you know, contingencies force me to hand it into an agent or an executive or someone like that, right? And then it's just done because the world, quote unquote, needed it because the capitalist economy in some way needed me to hand this thing in.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's just like it's constantly churning.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Never done. Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. And I love that too. There's nothing wrong with that.
But the thing I'm thinking of is though, does your brother start making art first? And then you model yourself on him in some way? Like, what is the actual quantum change in the household with both of you?
I mean, my brother definitely was always drawing. And here it would be difficult to separate, the sort of like family lore from like specific memories or something. Did my brother draw more than I drew, or there was something about the focus that my brother brought. And it was like part of his. It was part of what I think my parents understood about my brother from quite a young age for him, is that he loved to draw. And he does. There's a picture, there's a kind of like a oil pastel drawing my brother did when he was probably 4 or something, that's in our house. It's quite abstract because it's like these kind of like green scribbles that represent a kind of like underbrush or like meadow or like just shrubs, and then a brown kind of grid of tree trunks, and then same colors, same greens in this scribble on the top of the composition, that are like the story, the branches of the trees, the crown. And so it's weirdly this mirror image, a symmetrical image of like just a verdant forest. And there's something weirdly kind of like formal about the composition that mirrors even just the work that he does now. And so it's hanging in the stairwell at my parents' house. And whenever I walk down those stairs and I see that picture, I'm like, damn, like this guy had it figured out what he was doing from when he was 4 years old or something. He's still doing this shit.
Was it just, I don't know how I can answer this, but like, was it just that he was connected in some way to this way of, this is where I'm like falling apart in terms of like how to characterize it. Because I want to think that like, okay, here's an example. Whenever I talk to someone, say like a classical musician or a composer, something like that, where they have like a specific, or a jazz musician, a specific instrument.
Yeah.
I'm always like, oh, well, was there something that spoke to you about that? And 90% of the time it's like, no, I got this in orchestra.
Yeah.
And then I just kept playing it. And then I got to be a virtuoso or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, oh, was there something about painting or that this way of expressing or this way of like connecting with the world and representing the world that like spoke to your brother? I don't know how you can answer it, but like,
yeah. Well, I don't know about my brother, but for me, from my side, at some point when my brother was maybe 5 or 6 years old, yeah, probably, maybe a little bit older, it somehow became a thing. Maybe when I was a little baby, maybe this is what it was. I'm 5 years younger than my brother. Maybe when I was a newborn, my parents were like, our dad needs to be able to do something, have an activity with my older brother. Anyway, they both got guitar lessons, classical guitar lessons at this mall, like one town over. Not a mall, shopping center. And neither of them took to it. And so we had these 2 guitars in the closet, 2 nylon string guitars, one kind of full size, and then the other, because my brother was 6 or 7 or whatever, was 3/4 size. So those were just sitting in the closet. And then I was actually just talking about this with my brother like last weekend. My brother has a show in London in a couple months, and he's going to in a couple weeks actually. Sorry. And you should check it out if you're in London listening to this podcast. Max Hetzler Gallery. Anyway, we have some British cousins, some like distant British cousins, and they are evidently a very musical family. Both, I think it's on my mom's side, which makes sense because we have other musical relatives on that side of the family. But both the dad and the son sang in the King's College Choir. And so they came and visited us in the summer of like 94 or something. And the kid was just a few years older than my brother. They really connected, and they bonded over like Fugazi. In on the Kill Taker had just come out, and they bonded over Nirvana. I think it's before Kurt had died. I don't know what the timeline is, but anyway. So our cousin Francis got that big guitar out of the closet and tuned it, and then he left, and then it was sitting around tuned up, my brother started playing it, and he started a band with his buddies, and then because yeah, I'm like super imitative. I'm just trying to do whatever my brother does. I wanted to play it, and so my brother got the little guitar out of the closet, and he actually strung it upside down. I'm left-handed. He strung it upside down for me, and showed me how to play "Come as You Are," and then from there, that was it for me. Uh, that was it. But weirdly, I didn't realize at the time that like a lot of people just like from there, what they do is learn how to play other people's songs or songs that already exist. And for me, the whole thing about trying to decode the instrument, trying to figure out my way through this weird thing, was to write things for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know anyone else's songs, and I would just write songs. And, I just got into this ethic of like each one explores a little bit further than the song before. And so that's how that was the sort of basic template of like my orientation to music. It was about exploring and discovering, going a little bit further each time.
Are you in a bubble at all? Are you getting feedback? Because I think a lot about people who have a unique style that in general, and that's why I'm asking you in particular, that they have some kind of like space where they get to discover stuff on their own without having other people's wants and desires or beliefs impinge on them and push them in certain directions. Or this is the other possibility. You have that, but you just have your own presence of mind and enough of a solid ego of your own. I don't mean in a bad way, but just like,
Sure.
who you are, that it can deflect and it doesn't matter. Like, were either of those?
I think more the former. It's funny, like, now I know in hindsight that there were music scenes in the small cities in Connecticut. There was hardcore and all that stuff.
A lot of hardcore in that area, right?
Yeah, hugely, yeah. And we were totally disconnected from that. Where we lived was like rural enough, or just what, our town had nothing going on, and so it just wasn't like that. For us, it was really sometimes I don't know much. I mean, I loved the band Ween in the 90s, and there's still some Ween that I love. And sometimes I think about it like that, like they were just, they're just in their weird, like kind of rural East Coast town with a 4-track, trying to gas each other up on like, check this one out, And that was kind of me and my brother for a couple of years.
Was there anything else you wanted to do, or once you kind of started to play music, you're like, I'm going to pursue this?
I don't know exactly when that came into focus. Because I was interested in, I had noticed that like through middle school, I had like phases where I was like really, really into one thing or really, really into another. There was a time that I was like, I got obsessed with the lemurs of Madagascar.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like read and learned everything I could about lemurs. I loved the story of their independent evolution on this island, and just the idea of them being lower primates and the prehensile tail and everything. It was what I was really into. And so much so, actually, that they took me out of the science class in middle school and let me do an independent study on lemurs.
Yeah.
And so, I think I was just that kind of kid a little bit. I had this just little bit of like this real focused kind of, I don't know, real, laser kind of approach to things. And so, yeah, I think once it went toward music, like I really felt like this is what I think that I got really into it, but I didn't really I don't know when I like thought about doing it as a life or something like that. I don't know when really that cohered for me. I was really, really into school as well. I like loved, there was a lot that I loved about school, and I was a good student for a long time.
Were you conscious that there was a panoply of existential possibilities for you, or were you just existing in the moment?
More existing in the moment, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's familiar. Like I this is all, a lot of this is resonating with me because it was
Okay.
just, it took until later on in life. And I'm slightly curious. You left college like in your second year, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yep, I did go back, but yes, I left because I was like, this place is not for me. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Was it that I got kicked out of grad school, and I got kicked out of grad school because I was mostly writing comedy. I was writing scripts. I was doing the other stuff that I was, and then when I was supposed to be writing on my dissertation, instead I did the thing I wanted to do. And they're like, no, we want you to write about Aristotle or whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm going to write about Heidegger. And they're like, get out of here.
Heidegger? Absolutely not.
It was a pretty conservative department.
Where was it? Where was this? I'm curious.
Temple University.
Okay.
They'll say they're not conservative. They will say that they are.
Is that in Philadelphia?
It is.
Yeah. Cool.
But it was because I just didn't know what, like, I was just kind of like, whatever the closest thing that was, again, kind of sort of figured out the contradiction between not risk taking, but also kind of what I wanted to do. I would just try to triangulate, get in the middle of there. And then it always ended up being something that didn't feel like great. But like, did you say like, you know what, I'm out of here? Or did you have to did you stop going to class? Like, what exactly happened in that moment? Because that seems to me pretty formative in the idea of leaving. Like, you went to Yale. That's like the elitist of the elite universities, right?
Yeah.
To say no, I'm done seems to me like a real kind of formative moment.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, it was. I mean, so going back to that moment, I mean, I just felt like I knew what I felt like I had already done that because I had gone to a boarding school for 3 years, and that had been an incredible experience. That was like college for me. And then I got to Yale, and it felt a little bit like more of the same, but without the sort of, the pursuit of knowledge can be this like beautiful, numinous, enterprise where you're filling in the gaps between all the questions you've had, as a kid, it can be so thrilling to suddenly be like, learn about the history of ideas, the history of thought, just be exposed to literature and like all of that stuff, Getting to Yale really was this different thing where it was like, oh, this is we're getting trained up here to rule the world.
Yeah.
That's what this is about. This is a real expensive finishing school. And at that point in my, you could say maybe also, oh, that's very cynical. Like, I'm sure people were there not for that and to learn and to do great work and to find themselves, discover themselves. But for me, where I think I was just sort of crystallizing into this thing of like, oh, like I've been writing these songs. I've been putting out these albums. I know there's this community out there. And I feel like a part of it, and I want to, that's where I want to be.
Do you mind if I ask, like, which boarding school? Was it like Exeter or one of those places? Like,
it was Andover.
Andover. Okay. Yeah. So like, before Andover, were you already introduced to that kind of like elite context?
No.
Or was that the first time you dove in?
That was the first time I had been a part of that. Yeah.
Did you feel good? Was it like getting into a warm pool? Like what was the like, what was the internal feeling?
Again, like, I think because, like what we've already talked about, the general, the sort of like not emotional, the sort of emotional closeness of my upbringing made me fairly just like stoic. So I think probably it was scary. It was scary, you know, in a lot of ways. I was kind of a bumpkin, you know. Again, like my parents, you know, they were well educated people, and they encouraged us to be smart and to explore what we were passionate about. But just on the level of, you know, the confluence of power and privilege and wealth and everything, to the extent that that was visible at Andover, I think that I was reflexively dismissive, scornful of it, and probably beneath that scorn there was like uncertainty and fear. But to be fair to Andover, also like I don't think Need Blind was a thing yet at that time. But there were a lot of it was the most diverse place that I had ever been, economically, ethnically, in every way, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's something interesting there, and I don't have like a full thought,
Yeah.
but I do think that like there is a certain way that elite institutions churn out people who follow elite ideas and just like kind of like, yes, I'm not going to deviate from this script, but also like a lot of people, like I think yourself, come out of there like with a very particular, like unique way of making art. And I'm not sure what the difference is between like, I don't, you know, if it's the whole thing's like a black box, I don't know what happens where some people come out where now we're Henry Kissinger and some people come out where now we're Noam Chomsky, if that makes any sense.
Oh, right. Where did Chomsky go?
I'm not sure, but I know, you know, he taught at MIT.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
for decades.
Yeah.
And that has its own particular
It might have
way of doing things.
something to do with the relationship to authority. I don't know. I think I was reflexively skeptical. I had an antagonistic relationship to authority. And I think that's helped me at every step of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we're right at the end. So if I can just loop back to where
Yeah.
I dropped like this mythos of the parents
Oh, yeah.
that
Oh,
we kind
right.
of talked
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
at the beginning. Because this seems to me, my own relationship to authority is very much based on my relationship with my parents, which is in turns loving and grateful and also resentful of their authority.
I mean, you're describing every child parent relationship ever, I'm sure.
Some.
Well, you probably talk to a lot of people about exactly this, so maybe you have a broader view into this. Yeah,
That's the thing. There's no bead on it. There's no generalization I can make. Some people are like me. Some people I'll say that and they look at me like I'm an alien and they're like, I love my parents. I mean, not that I don't, but like, we have an adult relationship. We can talk about anything. And I'm like, no, I'm in my 40s and I still see them as authority figures.
Yeah.
And I think pushing against them was something has been something that defined the early part of my life, and pushing against the authority that they represented, this kind of like Kafka-esque, and I mean that in the real way of just like we're an authority and we tell you what to do, and maybe it'll be absurd.
Kafka wrote a book about his relationship with his dad, didn't he?
I have not read a single nonfiction piece.
He did.
Kafka.
I mean, it might have been published post after his death. Posthumously? There we go. Posthumously. Yeah.
Oh, it's like one of the things that his lawyer saved. Like he's like, please burn
That
these.
sounds right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's called like Letter to My Father or something like that. I haven't read it, but I've been curious about that. I didn't know Kafka actually was famous for his relationship with his parents. That's fascinating.
I didn't eat. Well, now I got to read that.
Yeah.
But that's the question. Like, were your parents, when you were younger, were they human beings to you, or were they these authority figures that you just had to follow and you developed in some way in relation to this authority?
Well, I wonder if we're just purely cleaving to a generational axis. I feel like parenting was invented in the 1990s. You know what I mean? And so of course I'm with you. They were remote, aloof, far off people.
Yeah. Then how do you, how are you able, I guess this is the question. And again, maybe it's just a fluke.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like I was able to. There's no like, I don't have a good explanation. How are you able to choose what you wanted for yourself as opposed to what maybe others wanted, whether they're parents, whether it's the quote unquote society?
Yeah.
How are you able to like be like, no, I know this is what I want for myself and I got to pursue it?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And particularly wrapping it into what the relationship with the parents is like is an interesting twist on it. I mean, I would say that, like any authority figure, they giveth and they taketh away. Like on the one hand, what they gave me and also my brother is, like we were talking about, this great sense of independence and a nurturing of intellectual curiosity, and like individual pursuit, a sort of motivation from within to go after what it was you were interested in or what you had questions about, And then on the other hand, I think that broadly they were skeptical at best of the idea of me doing music, but at that point, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to just say, fuck you, I'm going to do what you showed me how to do, which is pursue the thing that I want to do.
Was there an argument? Was it an actual like, hey, look,
well, I don't know. And if they are listening, my mom has Google alerts on my name and everything. If they do end up listening to it, I don't want to hold their feet to the fire. And Mom, I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad. So, we'll say all that. We'll get that out of the way.
I get it. Yeah. There was definitely a point where I realized my parents listened to at least one episode of this or one episode of the show I do with my wife.
How did you feel?
I don't think I'm ever untruthful. And I think I'm very open about that. They both did the best they could do, and that they were very loving.
Yeah.
Like but at the same time, it's just like, it's what happens when you have a child that doesn't want the script that the parents hand them.
Yeah.
And then fights against that and tries to discover what it is and has to like, I think about it like it's a lot about excavating what I really wanted out from under my parents' desires.
Yeah. Oh, right.
And it took decades. It took a while to like really get there. And that's, again, why I go back to this at the beginning. The New York that beckoned me was dead by the time I got there.
Of course.
The comedy scene was dead. Luna Lounge was dead. Mark Maron moved to LA.
Yeah.
Like all of that stuff was gone.
Yeah.
Or even like the stuff that like in my head, I don't know if this was for you, but like the New York, the downtown art scene, or like Hal Hartley and the theater scene from the early 90s, like that stuff that I wanted.
Yeah.
Gone because it took me forever to fucking figure it out.
Yeah. You were like, oh wait, it's in Bushwick?
Right, exactly. And I'm stuck in Greenpoint?
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, some common ground there for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and then you come to LA and you figure it all out.
Yeah. Love a petering out where we're both like, yep, yeah, that seems right. That feels right. That
right, yeah. Yeah.
David, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah.
Your music has meant a lot to me for now decades. So thank you for joining me on the show.
Oh man, Andy, it's been a pleasure and yeah, fun to cool. I like your style, man. To
Thanks.
To have a podcast that's about this. It's childhood is where it all is, and to focus there and invite people to explore that. I think that's cool.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye.